The Moral Mathematician, Blaise Pascal's Covert Calculations Against Corruption, Chapter 1. A fateful whisper Paris, 1610. The quill scratched softly against parchment, barely audible over the crackling fire. Father François d'Aubigny, a Jesuit priest with eyes sunken from sleepless nights, paused his writing and glanced nervously at the door. "It must be done," he whispered to himself, his voice trembling, "for the greater glory of God." D'Aubigny returned to his letter, encoding a message that would soon reach François Ravaillac, a failed monk with a volatile temper and a burning hatred for the king. Across the city, in a modest home, a young boy named Blaise Pascal slept peacefully, unaware of the wheels being set in motion that would shape his future and the fate of France. The next day, King Henry IV's carriage ground to a halt in a narrow street, blocked by a cart. As the king peered out the window, Ravaillac struck, plunging a dagger into Henry's chest. "I am wounded," the king cried out, blood staining his doublet. A second thrust silenced him forever. News of the assassination spread like wildfire. 8-year-old Blaise, clutching his father's hand, watched as their neighbors poured into the streets, faces etched with shock and fear. "Papa," Blaise asked, his young mind grappling with the concept of regicide, "why would anyone kill the king?" Etienne Pascal looked down at his son, seeing the intellect burning behind those inquisitive eyes. "Sometimes, Blaise," he said carefully, "people believe they're doing right, even when they're committing terrible wrongs." As night fell over a city in turmoil, Father d'Aubigny knelt in his chamber, frantically burning papers. Among the ashes lay fragments of Juan de Mariana's infamous treatise on the king and the king's education, its words on justified tyrannicide now transformed into tragic reality. Blaise Pascal, unable to sleep, stared out his window at the restless city. Something had awakened in him, a need to understand, to question, to seek truth in a world suddenly revealed as complex and dangerous. Little did he know that this day would set him on a path to confront the very order behind the king's death, armed not with a dagger, but with an even more powerful weapon, his pen. Chapter 2. Seeds of Doubt. Paris, 1623. 13 years had passed since the assassination of King Henry IV, but its shadow still loomed large over France. Blaise Pascal, now a precocious young man of 20, sat in rapt attention as his father, Etienne, recounted the latest rumors swirling through Parisian society. "They say Ravaillac wasn't acting alone," Etienne said in a hushed tone, leaning closer to his son. "There are whispers of Jesuit involvement, of secret meetings and coded messages." Blaise's mind raced, connecting dots his father couldn't see. "But the Jesuits are men of God," he countered, playing devil's advocate. "Surely they wouldn't condone regicide?" Etienne's face darkened. "Power corrupts, my son, even those who claim to serve a higher purpose." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jacqueline, Blaise's younger sister, entered with a letter in hand. "It's from Uncle Louis," she announced, her voice tinged with excitement. Blaise took the letter, his eyes widening as he read. "Uncle Louis has been appointed to a position at court," he announced. "He wants me to assist him in some mathematical work for the treasury." Etienne beamed with pride, but his smile faltered as he noticed a postscript. "It seems your uncle has also arranged for you to attend some lectures at the Jesuit college," he said, his tone cautious. Blaise felt a mix of emotions, excitement at the opportunity to expand his knowledge, but also a gnawing unease. The Jesuits were renowned for their educational prowess, but the earlier conversation about their potential dark secrets lingered in his mind. As Blaise prepared for bed that night, he found himself unable to shake off a sense of foreboding. He pulled out a small notebook, one he'd taken to carrying for jotting down his thoughts and observations. With a trembling hand, he wrote, "Truth is often obscured, not by lack of light, but by misdirection. To find it, one must be willing to look in the shadows, even when they fall across the altars of the most revered." Little did Blaise know that these words would become a guiding principle in the years to come, as he navigated the treacherous waters of Parisian intellectual and religious life. The next morning, as Blaise made his way to the Jesuit college for his first lecture, he couldn't help but feel he was stepping into the lion's den. The imposing facade of the building loomed before him, its intricate stonework seeming to hide 1,000 secrets. As he crossed the threshold, Blaise steeled himself. He was here to learn, yes, but also to observe, to question, to seek the truth behind the polished veneer of Jesuit scholarship. Little did he know that this day would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about faith, morality, and the very nature of truth itself. Chapter 3. The Viper's Nest, Paris, 1624. The Jesuit college's lecture hall buzzed with anticipation as Blaise Pascal took his seat. At 21, he was younger than most of the attendees, but his sharp eyes and attentive posture betrayed an intellect beyond his years. Father Antoine de Morales, a renowned Jesuit theologian, swept into the room, his black robes billowing behind him. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily to the back of the hall. "Today we discuss the intricacies of moral action in a complex world." Blaise leaned forward, pen poised over his notebook. He had heard whispers about de Morales' controversial teachings, and now he would hear them firsthand. "Consider this," de Morales proposed, his eyes glinting. "A man owes a debt he cannot pay. Is it not morally permissible for him to lie about his finances to avoid imprisonment, which would prevent him from ever repaying?" A murmur rippled through the audience. Blaise's brow furrowed as he scribbled furiously. "Or perhaps," de Morales continued, "a woman knows her husband intends to commit a crime. Is she not justified in breaking her marital vows to prevent a greater sin?" As the lecture progressed, Blaise felt a growing unease. De Morales wove a complex web of justifications for actions that, on their face, seemed clearly wrong. Yet with each example, the line between right and wrong blurred further. After the lecture, Blaise found himself cornered by Father de Morales. "You're Etienne Pascal's son, are you not?" the priest inquired, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I am, Father," Blaise replied cautiously. "Your notes were quite extensive," de Morales observed. "I do hope you found the lecture illuminating." Blaise chose his words carefully. "It was certainly thought-provoking, Father. I have much to consider." De Morales' smile widened. "Perhaps you'd like to discuss further over dinner? I'm hosting a small gathering this evening for some of our more promising students." Blaise felt a chill run down his spine. This was an opportunity to delve deeper into the Jesuit world, but at what cost? "I would be honored, Father," he heard himself say. That evening, Blaise found himself in a dimly lit dining room, surrounded by Jesuit priests and eager students. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, touching on theology, politics, and morality. As the night wore on, Blaise's keen ears caught snippets of hushed conversations. "The new cardinal is sympathetic to our cause. If the ends justify the means." Ravaillac was a madman, but perhaps a necessary one. Blaise's heart raced. Were they truly discussing the assassination of King Henry IV so casually? As he prepared to leave, Father de Morales pulled him aside. "You've shown great promise, young Pascal," he said, his breath heavy with wine. "We could use minds like yours in our order. Think on it, won't you?" Blaise nodded noncommittally, his mind reeling. As he stumbled into the cool night air, he felt as though he had glimpsed the true face of the Jesuit order, and it terrified him. Back in his room, Blaise's hand shook as he penned a new entry in his notebook. "I have walked among vipers, their words honeyed poison. To combat this evil, one must become a viper oneself, striking from the shadows with the venom of truth." Little did Blaise know that these words would soon become a self-fulfilling prophecy, setting him on a dangerous path of secret writings and veiled identities. Chapter 4. The anonymous pen, Paris, 1656. Blaise Pascal's quill scratched furiously across the parchment, his hand barely keeping pace with the torrent of thoughts flooding his mind. The candle on his desk flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls of his modest study. "My dear friend," he wrote, his handwriting deliberately altered, "I write to you with grave concerns about the moral teachings that have taken root in our beloved church." It had been over 30 years since that fateful dinner at the Jesuit college, and Pascal had spent the intervening years observing, learning, and quietly seething at the corruption he saw festering within the Jesuit order. Now, at last, he was ready to strike. A soft knock at the door made him jump. Hastily covering his work, he called out, "Enter." Jacqueline, now Sister Jacqueline de Saint-Euphemie, slipped into the room. Her face, framed by her nun's habit, was etched with worry. "Blaise, are you certain about this? The risks." Pascal stood, embracing his sister. "I must, Jacqueline. The Jesuits' casuistry has gone too far. Their teachings are poisoning the very foundations of morality." Jacqueline nodded solemnly. "I've seen it in the convent. Sisters justifying all manner of indulgences with clever wordplay and twisted logic." Pascal returned to his desk, lifting the cover from his writing. "This is the first of what I hope will be many letters. I call them the provincial letters. They will expose the Jesuits' corrupt teachings for all to see." "But why anonymously?" Jacqueline asked, though she already knew the answer. "You know why," Pascal replied grimly. "The Jesuits' influence reaches far. To attack them openly would be unwise." As if to answer his point, a commotion erupted in the street below. They rushed to the window to see a man being dragged away by the city guard, his cries of innocence fading into the night. "Another victim of their influence in the courts," Pascal muttered, his resolve hardening. Jacqueline squeezed his hand. "Be careful, brother. Your words may be your weapon, but they have swords and worse at their disposal." Pascal nodded, returning to his desk. As Jacqueline left, he dipped his quill once more and continued writing, his words flowing with renewed purpose. "And so, my friend, we must ask ourselves, can a faith that requires such intricate justifications for simple morality truly be the path to salvation? Or have we strayed so far from Christ's teachings that we can no longer recognize the truth?" As the night wore on, Pascal completed his first letter. Rolling it carefully, he sealed it with plain wax, no identifying mark. Tomorrow, it would begin its journey through a complex network of sympathizers, eventually finding its way to a small printing press on the outskirts of Paris. Little did Pascal know that this letter would be the spark that would ignite a firestorm of controversy, shaking the very foundations of the Jesuit order and the Church itself. As he finally retired for the night, exhausted but exhilarated, Pascal murmured a quiet prayer. "God grant me the strength to see this through and the wisdom to know when to stop." But deep down, he knew there would be no stopping. The die was cast, and the battle for the soul of faith had begun. Chapter 5. The Firestorm. Paris, 1656. The streets of Paris buzzed with excitement. On every corner, in every salon, people huddled together, whispering fervently about the latest sensation. A series of letters attacking the Jesuit order, penned by a mysterious author known only as Louis de Montalte. Blaise Pascal, the true author behind the pseudonym, walked among them, his heart racing as he overheard snippets of conversation. "Did you read the latest letter? The way it exposes their hypocrisy. But who is this Montalte? He must be a man of great courage. The Jesuits are in an uproar. They're demanding the author be found and silenced." Pascal quickened his pace, pulling his hat lower over his eyes. He made his way to a small, nondescript bookshop tucked away in a quiet alley. Inside, his trusted friend and publisher, Guillaume Desprez, awaited. "Blaise," Desprez whispered urgently, "the demand for the letters is overwhelming. We can barely keep up with the printing." Pascal allowed himself a small smile. "Then our message is being heard." Desprez's expression turned grave. "But at what cost? The Jesuits are pressuring the authorities to find the author. There are rumors of arrests, of torture." A chill ran down Pascal's spine, but he steeled himself. "We knew the risks when we began. We cannot stop now." As they spoke, the shop's door burst open. Jacqueline rushed in, her face pale with fear. "Blaise, you must come quickly. Father Nuet is at the house, asking questions about your whereabouts, your writings." Pascal's mind raced. Father Etienne Nuet was a prominent Jesuit, known for his fierce defense of the order. If he suspected Pascal's involvement, "Go," Desprez urged. "I'll handle things here. Be careful, my friend." Pascal and Jacqueline hurried through the winding streets, taking a circuitous route to avoid detection. As they approached their home, they saw Father Nuet leaving, his face twisted with frustration. Once inside, Jacqueline turned to her brother, her eyes brimming with tears. He knows Blaise. He may not have proof, but he suspects. What are we to do? Pascal paced the room, his mind working furiously. We continue, he said finally, but we must be more careful. Change our methods, our meeting places. That night, Pascal worked feverishly on his next letter, his quill flying across the page. My dear friends, the vipers have been roused from their nest. They writhe and hiss, spewing venom at shadows. But we must not falter, for in their desperate attempts to silence the truth, they reveal the very corruption we seek to expose. As dawn broke, Pascal sealed the letter, his resolve stronger than ever. But as he moved to hide his writing materials, a loose floorboard caught his eye. An idea formed. With Jacqueline's help, he created a hidden compartment beneath the floor, a secret space for his most incriminating writings. As they replaced the board, a knock echoed through the house. Pascal and Jacqueline exchanged alarmed glances. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Open in the name of the king, a voice commanded. Pascal's heart pounded. The moment he had feared had arrived. But as he moved to answer the door, he felt a strange calm settle over him. Whatever came next, he knew he was fighting for what was right. With a deep breath, he opened the door to face his accusers, ready to defend his faith and his conscience, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. The Reckoning, Paris, 1657. The room was thick with tension as Blaise Pascal stood before the tribunal. 5 stern-faced men, including Father Nuet, sat in judgment, their eyes boring into him. Monsieur Pascal, the lead inquisitor, began, his voice dripping with disdain. You stand accused of authoring seditious materials against the Society of Jesus. How do you answer these charges? Pascal's mind raced, but his face remained impassive. Months of cat-and-mouse games had led to this moment. His hidden compartment had been discovered, but the evidence was circumstantial at best. I am a man of faith and science, Pascal replied calmly. I seek only truth, wherever it may lead. Father Nuet leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And does this truth lead you to attack the very foundations of our moral teachings? Pascal met his gaze unflinchingly. If those foundations are built on shifting sands of moral relativism, then perhaps they deserve scrutiny. A murmur rippled through the room. In the back, Pascal caught sight of Jacqueline, her face a mask of worry. The interrogation continued for hours. Pascal parried each accusation with carefully chosen words, never quite admitting guilt, but never fully denying it either. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the chamber, the lead inquisitor spoke again. Monsieur Pascal, while we cannot prove definitively that you are this, Louis de Montalte, your writings and associations have cast doubt on your loyalty to the Church. Pascal's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. My loyalty is to God and to the truth of his teachings. If that places me at odds with certain interpretations, so be it. The tribunal conferred in hushed tones. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Blaise Pascal, you are hereby placed under house arrest. Your writings will be confiscated, and you are forbidden from publishing or distributing any further works without express permission. As the guards moved to escort him out, Father Nuet approached. This isn't over, Pascal, he hissed. We will root out every last one of your conspirators. Pascal allowed himself a small, defiant smile. Perhaps, Father, you should concern yourself less with rooting out perceived enemies and more with rooting out the corruption within your own ranks. That night, confined to his study, Pascal penned one final letter. My friends, our battle has come at a great cost. But take heart, for the seeds of truth we have planted will continue to grow. The Jesuits may silence one voice, but they cannot silence the awakening conscience of a nation. As he wrote, Pascal became aware of a presence in the room. Looking up, he saw Jacqueline, her face etched with determination. It's not over, brother, she said softly. Your words have inspired others. Even now, they take up the pen to continue your work. Pascal nodded, a mix of pride and sadness washing over him. He had struck a blow against the corruption he saw poisoning his beloved faith, but at what personal cost? As dawn broke over Paris, Pascal looked out his window at the city stirring to life. He knew that somewhere out there, the fight would continue. And though his own voice might be silenced, the truth he had spoken would echo on. Chapter 7. Legacy of Truth. Paris, 1662. The room was quiet save for the labored breathing of Blaise Pascal. 5 years had passed since his confrontation with the tribunal, years marked by declining health and relentless surveillance. Yet even as his body weakened, his mind remained sharp, his conviction unshaken. Jacqueline sat by his bedside, her hand gently clasping his. "The letters continue to circulate, Blaise," she whispered. "Your words still ignite minds and hearts across France." A weak smile played across Pascal's lips. "Then it was not in vain," he murmured. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside. The door burst open, revealing a breathless young man, one of their trusted messengers. "Monsieur Pascal," he gasped, "news from Rome. The Pope. He's launched an investigation into the Jesuits' moral teachings." Pascal's eyes widened, a spark of their old fire returning. "Tell me everything," he urged. As the messenger recounted the details, it became clear that the seeds Pascal had planted years ago had finally borne fruit. His provincial letters, though officially banned, had continued to spread underground, eventually reaching the highest echelons of the church. "It seems," Jacqueline said, her voice filled with wonder, "that your pen truly was mightier than their sword, brother." Pascal closed his eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. When he opened them again, he spoke with renewed strength. "Bring me my quill and parchment. There is one last letter I must write." Despite Jacqueline's protests about his health, Pascal insisted. With trembling hands, he began to write. "To all who seek truth and justice, I write to you now at the end of my journey, but at what I hope is the beginning of a new era for our faith. We have faced persecution, threats, and silence, but our voices have not been stilled." As Pascal wrote, pouring out his final thoughts and hopes for the future, the room seemed to fill with a palpable energy. It was as if all the passion and purpose of his life were distilling into these last words. Hours passed, and as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Pascal set down his quill. "It is finished," he said softly. Jacqueline took the letter, her eyes scanning the words with reverence. "This will be your testament, Blaise, your final gift to the world." Pascal nodded, his strength fading. "Ensure it reaches those who will carry on the fight," he whispered. In the days that followed, as news of Pascal's declining health spread, an unexpected visitor arrived. Father Nuet, older now and somewhat diminished, stood at Pascal's bedside. "I came to make peace," the old Jesuit said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Your words, they have forced us to confront uncomfortable truths." Pascal regarded him with a mixture of surprise and compassion. "Then perhaps there is hope for reconciliation after all," he replied. As Pascal's life ebbed away, the impact of his work continued to ripple outward. His final letter, copied and distributed in secret, became a rallying cry for reform within the church. In his last moments, surrounded by Jacqueline and a small circle of loyal friends, Pascal whispered, "The truth fears nothing but concealment. Let it always be brought into the light." With those words, Blaise Pascal, mathematician, philosopher, and defender of truth, breathed his last. But his legacy lived on. In the years that followed, the Jesuit order faced increasing scrutiny and eventual reform. Pascal's provincial letters became required reading for those seeking to understand the complexities of faith and morality. And in quiet corners of Paris, in hidden rooms and secret gatherings, people still whispered the name of Louis de Montalte, the anonymous writer who dared to challenge the powerful and defend the truth, no matter the cost. As dawn broke over Paris on the day after Pascal's death, Jacqueline stood at the window of his study, clutching his final letter. She knew that though her brother was gone, his words would continue to ignite minds and hearts for generations to come. The battle for truth, she realized, was never truly over. But thanks to Blaise Pascal, it would always have a champion.